Cleopatra VII Philopator's death in 30 BCE is where any honest investigation of her tomb must begin.
Ancient biographers agree on this sequence. Antony dies first by his own hand. Cleopatra dies shortly after. Octavian permits them to be buried together.
Plutarch, writing within 2 centuries, says Cleopatra fled for refuge into her tomb inside Alexandria and then died after arranging her affairs.
Cassius Dio adds that Octavian, Augustus, seized her treasures and allowed an honorable burial, implying a prepared structure, not a hasty pit.
From those texts, the baseline hypothesis is clear. The tomb was in or near Alexandria's royal/ritual landscape and housed both Cleopatra and Antony.
Where in Alexandria? Hellenistic sources describe the Soma or Soma, the walled precinct of royal tombs, including Alexander's, within or adjoining the palatial quarter.
Another anchor point is Anti-Rhodos, the palatial island in the eastern harbor associated with Cleopatra's court, now underwater due to earthquakes and the AD 365 tsunami.
Frank Gaudio's underwater surveys mapped large palace foundations, colonnades, and statuary bases consistent with Ptolemaic royal architecture, proof of the court's footprint, not of the tomb itself.
So why hasn't the tomb been found in Alexandria? Centuries of subsidence, seismic events, coastal change, late Roman remodeling, and dense modern city layers complicate excavation.
Enter a rival hypothesis that Cleopatra chose to associate her burial with Isis-Osiris cult space outside central Alexandria, specifically at Taposiris Magna, west of the city.
Since 2005, Dr. Kathleen Martinez has led systematic work at Taposiris Magna, arguing that Cleopatra's ideological self-fashioning as new Isis could place her tomb there. Key finds at the temple include hundreds of coins bearing Cleopatra's portrait, elite burials, e.g. gilded mummies, ritual installations and statues, evidence of intense late Ptolemaic activity.
In 2022, Martinez's team announced a 1,300-meter tunnel beneath the sanctuary. An engineering feat compared to the Eupalinos tunnel, likely an aqueduct, but possibly part of a broader sacred port complex.
In 2025, sonar and dives identified a submerged port offshore from Taposiris Magna, with polished floors, columns, anchors, and foray, implying the sanctuary once linked to maritime logistics, an unexpected clue.
National Geographic, CBS, The Times, and other outlets reported the port discovery. Egypt's ministry highlighted the site's Ptolemaic maritime significance. This does not prove the tomb is there, but it increases the site's plausibility. Scholarly caution remains. There is no inscription or burial chamber tied to Cleopatra at Taposiris Magna yet, and many Egyptologists still favor Alexandria for the burial. Returning to the texts, Plutarch places Cleopatra's mausoleum near an Isis sanctuary in Alexandria, potentially the Isis Lokius temple in the Royal Quarter, aligning burial with state religion inside the city.
Dio's account of Octavian displaying Cleopatra's adornments in Roman temples underscores how thoroughly Rome inventoried Alexandria's sacred and royal spaces after the conquest.
Archaeologically, Alexandria's royal quarter was partly submerged and rubble-layered. If Cleopatra's tomb was there, it might lie under modern neighborhoods or offshore structures.
Conversely, Taposiris Magna sits on firmer ground west of the city. Earthquakes and sea level change pushed part of its infrastructure seaward, which explains the newly found port.
Why pursue Taposiris at all? Because Cleopatra consciously performed Isis in state ritual. In a crisis, aligning her eternal image with Isis-Osiris, rebirth, at a revered temple could be the ultimate political religious gesture.
A practical scenario some researchers model: Antony and Cleopatra embalmed and entombed together quickly under Roman oversight, but in a location meaningful to Egyptian theology and controllable to Rome. Alexandria fits that better. Taposiris is the bold alternative.
Underwater work at Anti-Rhodos and new offshore mapping west of Alexandria show both zones suffered quake-tsunami damage, meaning burial evidence could be destroyed, displaced, or deeply buried.
Today's search uses remote sensing, ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR bathymetry, and stratigraphic cores plus classical text analysis and GIS shoreline reconstructions.
What we can say with certainty, as of September 24, 2025, no verified tomb of Cleopatra has been found. Strongest textual case favors Alexandria. Strongest archaeological momentum currently favors Taposiris Magna. When Cleopatra VII came to power in 51 BCE, Alexandria was already nearly 3 centuries old, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE.
The city was laid out on a Hippodanian grid by Dinocrates, with 2 main axes, the Canopic Way east-west and the Street of the Soma north-south. The Royal Quarter, Brucheian, dominated the city's northeast, containing palaces, gardens, libraries, and cult complexes. Strabo, visiting in the early Roman period, described a district of sumptuous buildings, colonnades, and harbors, giving us our most detailed picture. At the quarter's heart was the Soma, or Sema, a walled precinct where Alexander's embalmed body lay in a golden coffin.
Later Ptolemaic kings were also buried there, creating a dynastic mausoleum cluster, hence why scholars expect Cleopatra's tomb might have joined it.
Unfortunately, centuries of conquest, repurposing, and natural disasters obscured the Soma's exact position. Today, it lies beneath dense, modern Alexandria.
Alongside the Soma stood the Isis Lokius sanctuary, where Cleopatra may have enacted her role as Isis in ritual, giving a symbolic anchor for burial inside the city.
The Great Library and the Mausoleon, though not directly tied to the tomb, reinforced Alexandria's image as both intellectual and sacred capital.
Cleopatra's palace is likely spread across Antirodos Island and adjoining quays, with banquet halls, gardens, and processional ways to temples. Archaeologist Frank Gaudio's underwater excavations recovered columns, sphinxes, and blocks inscribed with hieroglyphs, confirming royal architecture beneath the waves. If Cleopatra had a prepared mausoleum in her capital, logic dictates it was close to her palace or in the Soma precinct, both now heavily submerged or built over.
The harbor itself was divided into the Great Harbor and Eunastos Harbor, separated by the Heptastadian Causeway.
The Pharos Lighthouse on Pharos Island guided ships and stood as one of the 7 wonders, looming over Cleopatra's Alexandria.
Within this setting, Cleopatra styled herself as Nea Isis, the new Isis, merging monarchy with divine motherhood, a theme that shaped theories of a temple-tomb association.
Roman conquest in 30 BCE brought structural violence. Octavian stripped the Soma of treasures, paraded Alexander's body, and reordered Alexandria's sacred geography.
The city then endured earthquakes, notably 365 CE, tsunamis, and gradual subsidence, sinking much of the royal quarter into the Mediterranean.
Today's downtown Alexandria covers what was once the Soma and royal palaces, making large-scale excavation nearly impossible without destroying the modern city.
This explains why no archaeologist has yet confirmed Cleopatra's tomb inside Alexandria, even though ancient texts strongly point there.
What remains feasible are underwater excavations off the eastern harbor and careful microsurveys in any redevelopment zones above suspected Soma ruins.
In summary, the Alexandria Hypothesis has strong textual weight and fits dynastic precedent, but modern urban and geological obstacles make it nearly intractable today.
Taposiris Magna lies about 30 miles west of Alexandria, near Lake Mariut and the Mediterranean coast.
The site is dominated by a large limestone temple, built during the reign of Ptolemy II Philadelphus, 285 to 246 BCE. Dedicated to Osiris, the god of rebirth, and associated with Isis, the temple became a major religious center during the Ptolemaic period. Cleopatra styled herself as the living Isis. This connection has fueled the idea that she may have chosen to be buried in a temple where Osiris was worshipped.
In 2005, Dominican archaeologist Dr. Kathleen Martinez began her mission at Taposiris Magna, convinced the tomb could lie here.
Her reasoning, Cleopatra's final act was not only political but religious, aligning for eternal presence with Isis and Osiris's cycle of death and rebirth.
Over the years, Martinez's team uncovered hundreds of artifacts that strengthened the case for Cleopatra's presence.
One of the most significant finds was a cache of coins bearing Cleopatra's profile, minted during her reign. Coins of Cleopatra in a temple dedicated to Isis and Osiris strongly suggest her cultic association with this sanctuary. Excavators also discovered statues of Isis, Osiris, and royal figures, confirming the temple's centrality to late Ptolemaic religious life.
In 2009, Martinez's team located burial shafts around the temple, containing mummies covered with gilded cartonnage. While these burials were not Cleopatra's,
Their elite status suggested that high-ranking individuals chose to be buried near this sacred site.
In 2022, Martinez announced the discovery of a 1,300-meter tunnel beneath the temple, described as a geometric miracle.
The tunnel's design resembles the Tunnel of Eupalinos in Greece, suggesting advanced Hellenistic engineering knowledge.
Though likely serving as an aqueduct, Martinez proposed it might also lead toward a hidden burial chamber.
In 2025, sonar scans offshore from Taposiris revealed a submerged port, complete with columns, polished floors, anchors, and amphorae.
The discovery showed that Taposiris once had direct access to the sea, making it feasible for a royal funeral procession to dock there.
The temple port complex strengthened the case that Taposiris Magna was more than just a provincial shrine. It was an integrated royal sacred hub.
Martinez interprets these finds as pointing to Cleopatra's tomb. Critics argue they indicate ritual importance, but not necessarily her burial. Skeptics note that ancient sources explicitly say Cleopatra was buried in Alexandria, not in the desert west.
Martinez counters that Plutarch described her retreat into a tomb but never specified the final resting place after Roman control.
Furthermore, she argues that Augustus may have permitted Antony and Cleopatra to be buried in a politically neutral site outside Alexandria.
Other scholars stress that no hieroglyphic inscriptions, burial chambers, or cartouches explicitly naming Cleopatra have been found at Taposiris.
The temple itself shows evidence of later reuse in Roman and Byzantine times, which could obscure or destroy Ptolemaic burials.
Still, the combination of Cleopatra coins, sacred statues, mummies, the tunnel, and now a port keeps the Taposiris hypothesis alive.
The Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities continues to highlight discoveries at Taposiris, signaling its significance for heritage and tourism.
Whether or not Cleopatra's tomb lies here, Taposiris Magna has already rewritten our knowledge of late Ptolemaic sacred landscapes.
Now we will compare the Alexandria versus Taposiris hypotheses directly, weighing textual evidence against archaeological discoveries.
Ancient authors are nearly unanimous that Cleopatra was buried in Alexandria, the capital she ruled until her death.
Plutarch describes Cleopatra fleeing into her tomb within the city before her death, implying the structure stood in the royal quarter.
Cassius Dio confirms that Octavian allowed her burial alongside Antony, again associating the site with Alexandria.
Strabo, who visited Egypt a generation later, placed the Soma, royal mausoleum, in Alexandria, strengthening this textual tradition.
Thus, the Alexandria Hypothesis has the strongest literary basis, rooted in texts written within living memory of Cleopatra.
Yet, the archaeological evidence in Alexandria is weak because the royal quarter now lies beneath modern buildings and the sea.
Underwater excavations at Anti-Rhodos Island proved Cleopatra's palace existed there, but yielded no burial evidence.
By contrast, Taposiris Magna has produced a stream of Ptolemaic-era finds, including Cleopatra's coins, statues, and a monumental tunnel.
The 2025 discovery of a submerged port near Taposiris suggests the temple once had royal-level access to maritime routes.
Supporters argue Cleopatra may have sought burial at a sacred site of Isis and Osiris, fulfilling her religious-political self-presentation as the new Isis.
Martinez interprets the convergence of evidence, coins, statues, burials, tunnel, port, as pointing to Taposiris Magna as Cleopatra's tomb.
But critics note none of these finds explicitly mention Cleopatra by inscription or burial goods.
Textually, Taposiris Magna is absent from ancient sources about Cleopatra's burial, making this hypothesis entirely archaeological and interpretive.
Thus, the Alexandria Hypothesis is text-rich but excavation-poor, while the Taposiris Hypothesis is excavation-rich but text-poor. Geological processes complicate the Alexandria case. Earthquakes and the 365 CE tsunami submerged large portions of the royal quarter.
Meanwhile, Taposiris Magna remained on stable desert ground, making preservation of structures and artifacts more likely.
But Alexandria has dynastic precedent. Every Ptolemaic ruler before Cleopatra was entombed within the city, likely in or near the Soma.
Taposiris Magna, however, aligns with Cleopatra's religious identity, where burial as Isis beside Osiris would have symbolic resonance.
If Cleopatra did intend burial at Taposiris, it would mark a radical departure from dynastic tradition, perhaps a deliberate act of religious political theater.
Augustus may also have chosen Taposiris as a neutral burial ground, away from Alexandria's politically charged royal quarter. Still, there is no Roman record of moving her body, whereas the Alexandrian burial is explicitly mentioned. Current consensus among Egyptologists is cautious. Cleopatra's tomb most likely lies in Alexandria, but exploration at Taposiris should continue given its compelling finds. Both hypotheses suffer from the same ultimate problem. No chamber, no inscription, no body has been found in either location. Therefore, the mystery remains suspended between text and archaeology, waiting for the one discovery that could settle it. Now, we'll explore Roman motivations, why Augustus allowed Cleopatra and Antony to be buried together, and how politics shaped the tomb's secrecy.
When Cleopatra died in 30 BCE, Rome, through Octavian, later Augustus, was in full control of Egypt. Octavian's first priority was to secure Egypt's immense wealth and grain supply, making Cleopatra's death a political necessity rather than a personal vendetta.
According to Plutarch, Octavian allowed Cleopatra and Antony to be buried together, an unusual act of clemency toward a defeated enemy. This decision reflected both pragmatism and propaganda. Burying them together honored tradition while neutralizing potential martyrdom.
If Augustus had denied Cleopatra a proper burial, it could have provoked unrest among Egyptians who revered her as Isis incarnate.
By allowing her burial, Augustus co-opted her memory while ensuring her physical remains were under Roman control.
Antony's inclusion in the same tomb also eliminated the possibility of rival factions rallying around his memory apart from Cleopatra's.
Yet Augustus carefully shaped the public story. Cleopatra was not remembered as a noble queen, but as a seductress who endangered Rome.
In Roman literature, poets like Horace and Propertius portrayed her as the foreign temptress, vanquished by Roman virtue.
This propaganda campaign minimized the dignity of her tomb while ensuring it would not become a nationalist shrine. Still, Augustus could not erase Egyptian tradition. To Egyptians, Cleopatra's burial with Antony had echoes of Isis reuniting with Osiris. This symbolic reading may explain why Augustus ensured the tomb's exact location was concealed or controlled, preventing public access. There is no surviving Roman record naming the tomb's location, suggesting deliberate suppression of details. Augustus displayed Cleopatra's treasures in Rome, but not her body, keeping Egypt's queen both defeated and domesticated. This careful choreography helped Augustus reshape Egypt into his private domain, legally distinct from the Roman Senate's provinces. The secrecy of Cleopatra's tomb thus served two purposes: suppressing nationalist sentiment in Egypt and elevating Augustus's new image as uncontested ruler. Some historians argue Augustus may have deliberately chosen a discrete or symbolic location for the tomb inaccessible to the masses. Others believe the tomb was left in Alexandria's Soma, but cordoned off as part of the Romanized Royal Quarter. The absence of later references to pilgrimages or rituals at Cleopatra's tomb strengthens the case that Augustus neutralized its cultic potential.
In Roman art, Cleopatra became a symbol of luxuria, decadence, and moral warning, not a saintly queen.
Thus, the politics of memory shaped her tomb as much as the stones themselves. What was hidden became as powerful as what was shown.
If her tomb survives today, its location was likely obscured by deliberate Roman policy, not just geological disaster. In summary, Augustus buried Cleopatra and Antony together, but simultaneously buried their legacy, ensuring Rome controlled both their bodies and their story.
Now we'll examine the archaeological challenges of finding Cleopatra's tomb, from earthquakes and urban sprawl to modern excavation limits.
The search for Cleopatra's tomb is not just a historical puzzle. It is also a struggle against nature and time. One of the greatest obstacles is the AD 365 earthquake and tsunami, which devastated Alexandria and much of the eastern Mediterranean.
This disaster caused parts of the Royal Quarter, including palaces and temples, to sink beneath the sea. Over centuries, tectonic activity and subsidence continued to drag coastal structures underwater, burying them under layers of silt and sand. Modern Alexandria adds another challenge. Cleopatra's suspected burial zone lies beneath dense urban construction.
Excavating here is nearly impossible without demolishing neighborhoods and infrastructure.
Underwater archaeology at Anti-Rhodos and nearby sites is expensive, slow, and subject to shifting sands that bury discoveries within months. Political instability and funding shortages also hinder long-term excavation projects in Egypt.
Even when excavations proceed, urban sprawl in Alexandria prevents use of heavy machinery for deep digs.
At Taposiris Magna, challenges differ. The desert temple is partly ruined and has been reused in Roman and Byzantine times, complicating stratigraphy.
Excavators here must sift through thousands of minor finds to interpret a coherent narrative. Environmental conditions also pose risks. Coastal erosion and rising Mediterranean sea levels threaten both Alexandria and Taposiris.
Technology helps, but has limits. Ground-penetrating radar cannot penetrate deep waterlogged soils of Alexandria.
Sonar mapping and magnetometers offshore can locate submerged structures, but struggle to distinguish tomb chambers from warehouses. The modern cityscape makes core drilling difficult, since each borehole risks disrupting sewers, power lines, or ancient but fragile remains.
Tourism and heritage politics also weigh heavily. Discoveries must be balanced with Egypt's cultural diplomacy and tourism strategies.
Another obstacle is the absence of inscriptions. Without hieroglyphic or Greek names carved into stone, any burial chamber found could remain anonymous.
Looting in antiquity further complicates the picture. Romans and later invaders stripped many tombs, erasing critical evidence.
Even if Cleopatra's tomb survived intact, its contents may have been plundered, leaving only architectural traces.
The deep secrecy enforced by Augustus ensured little textual guidance survived, forcing archaeologists to work nearly blind.
Meanwhile, modern excavations must navigate Egypt's legal framework for heritage, which demands careful permits and collaboration. The risk of misinterpretation is also high. A tunnel may be mistaken for a burial corridor, or ritual statues misread as funerary markers.
All these challenges explain why, despite decades of searching, Cleopatra's tomb remains elusive. Some believe it may never be found, either destroyed by natural disasters or lying under inaccessible city blocks.
Yet every new technology, from LiDAR to DNA sequencing of mummies, brings fresh hope of identifying a hidden burial site.
The obstacles are
geological, urban, political, and technological. But each obstacle also deepens the allure of the search.
Now, we'll turn from obstacles to the archaeological breakthroughs and discoveries so far, from underwater palaces to newly unearthed statues and mummies.
The modern quest for Cleopatra's tomb has produced a wealth of discoveries, even if the tomb itself remains hidden. One of the earliest breakthroughs came from underwater excavations in Alexandria's eastern harbor, led by Frank Gaudio in the 1990s. At Antirodos Island, Gaudio uncovered the remains of Cleopatra's palace complex, long believed lost to earthquakes and subsidence.
The finds included granite sphinxes, some possibly reused from earlier pharaonic contexts, confirming royal presence in the harbor.
Massive statues of Isis and Osiris were also recovered, standing over 5 meters tall, now exhibited in Alexandria's museum. Architectural fragments, columns, architraves, and bases show the opulence of the Ptolemaic palace once connected to Cleopatra herself. Beyond Alexandria, at Taposiris Magna, Martinez's excavations revealed hundreds of coins minted in Cleopatra's reign.
Some coins showed wear patterns, suggesting they circulated heavily before being deposited as temple offerings.
Statues of Isis, Osiris, and Horus were also uncovered, broken but significant for their religious symbolism at Cleopatra's time.
In 2009, archaeologists found mummies with golden cartonnaged masks, indicating elite burials near the temple.
These burials, though not royal, demonstrated that high-status individuals sought burial at Taposiris Magna.
The most stunning find came in 2022, the discovery of a 1,300-meter tunnel beneath Taposiris Magna.
The tunnel's precision engineering mirrored Hellenistic projects like the Eupalinos Tunnel in Greece, hinting at advanced skills.
Martinez suggested it may lead to a hidden chamber, though no burial chamber has yet been found.
In 2025, divers identified a submerged port offshore from Taposiris, with polished floors, column bases, and amphorae.
The port revealed that the temple complex was once linked to maritime processions, perfect for a royal funeral route.
At the same site, anchors and amphorae confirmed active naval use during the late Ptolemaic era. Other finds included amulets of Isis and scarabs, reinforcing the temple's role as a sacred space tied to rebirth.
Every discovery adds context. While not proving Cleopatra's tomb is there, they enrich our picture of the world she shaped and left behind.
Meanwhile, Alexandria excavations continued to yield smaller finds: pottery, domestic items, and occasional inscriptions.
But the palace foundations underwater remain the most spectacular Alexandrian evidence.
Altogether, these discoveries, whether in Alexandria or Taposiris, create a powerful narrative. Cleopatra's physical tomb may be lost, but her archaeological shadow endures.
The mystery of Cleopatra's tomb is not only an archaeological puzzle, but also a powerful cultural symbol that transcends history.
For Egyptologists, the search represents the ultimate quest. Finding the last queen of Egypt would rival the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Scholars emphasize that such a discovery would transform our understanding of Ptolemaic funerary traditions and political symbolism. For archaeologists in the field, Cleopatra's tomb is both a professional dream and a logistical nightmare. The mystery captivates the public imagination because Cleopatra herself remains a global icon of power, beauty, and tragedy. In literature, the idea of Cleopatra's hidden tomb appears in novels, poems, and even detective fiction. Hollywood has also shaped popular views.
Films from Cleopatra 1934 to Cleopatra 1963 portray her as glamorous, with the tomb as her eternal stage. In video games like Assassin's Creed Origins, players explore Cleopatra's Egypt, reinforcing fascination with lost monuments and secret tombs.
Museums often use Cleopatra's image to attract visitors, even when her tomb has not been found.
Tourism campaigns in Egypt regularly highlight the ongoing search as part of national heritage storytelling.
The tomb's absence creates its own power, a void of mystery that invites speculation and wonder.
Writers often compare it to other great archaeological enigmas, the Great Pyramids, the lost city of Atlantis, or the tomb of Alexander.
For Egyptians, Cleopatra remains more than a queen. She embodies resilience against foreign domination.
Finding her tomb could reignite a sense of cultural pride and historical connection in modern Egypt.
For women worldwide, Cleopatra is often portrayed as a symbol of leadership and feminine power.
The tomb's mystery also fuels tourism economies. Millions visit Egypt each year, drawn by its ancient secrets. Even without a tomb, artifacts tied to Cleopatra, her coins, portraits, and inscriptions attract global fascination. The lost tomb has become a recurring theme in documentaries, each promising to reveal the final resting place of the queen.
At the same time, conspiracy theories flourish, claims that her body lies in Rome, in the Vatican, or hidden by secret societies.
This mix of fact, fiction, and fantasy keeps Cleopatra's memory alive in ways a confirmed tomb might not.
Her tomb has thus become a cultural artifact in itself, not found in stone, but alive in imagination.